As long as there have been prisons, there have been prisoners trying to escape. From tunnels to helicopters, it's amazing what people will come up with to escape the clink. And while there's plenty of great prison break stories out there, we've put together a list that's almost criminal. I'm Mike with List 25, and here are 25 unbelievable prison escapes that actually worked. Don't try this at home or at prison. The Great Escape. I'm going to kick off this list with quite a doozy. The escape from Nazi Germany prisoner of war camp, Stalag Luft, also known as the Great Escape. The idea came from squadron leader Roger Bushell to dig 3 tunnels named Tom, Dick, and Harry in hopes one would eventually lead out. Utilizing 600 men, they dug very small tunnels, 30 feet deep, just enough to get men to crawl through. Eventually, Harry was successfully completed, and 76 prisoners crawled to freedom. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. Of those that escaped, only 3 made it to safety.
24.
Sławomir Rawicz. In 1941, Sławomir Rawicz was imprisoned in a Russian gulag. Escaping with 6 others and traveling on foot south through the Gobi Desert, Tibet, and the Himalayas, he finally reached safety in India. Except, maybe none of that really happened. Years later, a reporter indicated Soviet documents proved Rawicz was at their gulag, and that he was released to an Iranian refugee camp due to a 1942 amnesty program. School is still out about if he falsified his account, but yeah, it doesn't look good.
23.
May's prison escape. Considered one of the most escape-proof prisons in Europe, Her Majesty's May's prison housed many Provisional Irish Republican Army, or IRA, soldiers. In 1983, Bobby Story and Jerry Kelly, 2 IRA inmates, watched for security weaknesses and finally took advantage of them, taking over part of the prison, dressed up as guards, and taking hostages. Overall, 35 prisoners escaped, the biggest prison breakout in British history.
22.
Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman is a major Mexican drug lord responsible for smuggling tons of cocaine into the US. In 2001, he was in a maximum security prison in Mexico, where he held significant influence over everyone, including the jail director. Using that influence, he escaped and was on the run for almost 13 years before being captured again. They didn't hold him long though. He escaped a second time, finding a tunnel that brought him to a construction site a little outside the prison. Of course, he was caught again and has yet to escape a third time.
21.
Kingman, Arizona State Prison escape. All violent prisoners at Kingman, Arizona State Prison, John McCluskey, Daniel Renwick, and Tracy Province, worked with McCluskey's first cousin, Casselyn May Welch, to break them out. On July 30th, 2010, she parked in the back of the prison, threw wire cutters over the fence, and other tools to help them escape. They cut a hole through the fence and made a run for it. Renwick took the getaway car, while the others walked 8 miles on foot and hijacked a truck. Renwick was arrested first, and in less than a month, the rest were arrested as well. Arizona officials concluded that it was because of prison negligence that they were allowed to leave so easily.
20.
Henri Charrière. Henri Charrière, nicknamed Papillon, was a French writer and convict. He wrote the autobiography Papillon about his escape attempts from several European prisons over his lifetime, before escaping one last time and becoming a citizen of Venezuela. Critics have insisted that most of what he wrote about probably didn't all happen to him and were likely stories he heard while in prison.
19.
TJ Lane. Serving consecutive life sentences for walking into a school cafeteria, shooting, and killing 3 students, TJ Lane wasn't put in a maximum security prison. A big mistake. Using wood from cabinets, he built a 13-foot ladder with 2 other inmates, climbed up to a roof, and then jumped down 15 feet, breaking out of the prison. However, they didn't make it too far and were all captured within 9 hours.
18.
The Texas 7. The Texas 7 were a group of convicts in a Texas maximum security prison that broke out. Overpowering employees and security guards in the maintenance shop, they stole a bunch of supplies and took off. A massive manhunt ensued, but they remained without capture for over a year, robbing stores, killing more people, and creating all kinds of chaos. In 2001, they were on America's Most Wanted, and after seeing the episode, a man tipped off the police where the men were hiding out, leading to their arrest.
17.
The Alcatraz Escape. Alcatraz is perhaps the most famous maximum security prison in American history, and in its entire lifetime, only one recorded prison break had ever successfully been completed, and I'm using the word successfully loosely. Clarence and John Anglin and Frank Morris methodically planned out their escape, creating dummies, building rafts, and digging holes using materials found all over the prison. In the summer of 1962, the men escaped without detection, crossing with their raft over to Angel Island. Prison guards didn't notice they were gone until that morning. A massive search went underway, but all they found was a boat paddle and Anglin's wallet wrapped in plastic. Whether or not they made it out alive is up for speculation, but many believe there's enough evidence to prove they were successful.
16.
The Greek Robin Hood. During the Greek economic crisis, Vassilis Palaiokostas thought the banks were responsible for their greed and corruption. He decided to make them pay. Robbing millions of euros from banks and then handing all the money out to the needy, he became known as the Greek Robin Hood. But of course, it caught up with him. In 2006, he was convicted of robbery and kidnapping and sent to serve a life in prison. While in prison, he hired a few men to hijack a helicopter, fly into the prison, and get him out. It worked. After being recaptured 2 years later, he was sent back to prison. But that didn't last long. In 2009, he escaped again by helicopter. He's still at large, known as an uncatchable folk hero.
15.
James Robert Jones. At 59, Bruce Walter Keith lived an ordinary life in Florida, getting married and working for an air conditioning company. Except his real name is James Robert Jones, a murderer and a fugitive. Escaping one of the toughest prisons in the county, Fort Leavenworth, he went to Florida and remained a fugitive for 40 years. Marshals caught him through face recognition technology.
14.
Alfréd Wetzler. Auschwitz was one of the most brutal concentration camps in history, and Alfréd Wetzler was one of the only prisoners known to have successfully broken out. Hiding for 4 days under a large stack of wood used for construction, Wetzler crawled under a fence when the guards were distracted and headed for Slovakia with plans and details about the camp. This information led to an Allied bombing run which saved the lives of 120,000 Jews.
13.
Charles Victor Thompson. Charles Victor Thompson was a death row inmate at Harris County Prison in Texas. He escaped using a fake ID and pretended to be from the Attorney General's office. The deputies bought it and he took off running. After 78 hours, officials found him at a liquor store, intoxicated.
12.
Catch Me If You Can. Known for inspiring the movie Catch Me If You Can, Frank Abagnale got out of plenty of tricky situations in his lifetime. Once he was caught for fraud, he was taken to the Federal Detention Center in Atlanta. Because of heavy inspections during that time, he was mistaken for a prison inspector and used fake IDs to help improve his identity. Claiming he needed to meet up with his FBI contact, he left the building and called a taxi.
11.
The Libby Prison Escape. During the American Civil War, Libby Prison was where the Confederates kept Union soldiers in Virginia. Notorious for its overcrowding, the malnutrition of the inmates, and the mortality rate, Libby Prison was the last place a Union soldier wanted to go. With such poor conditions, 103 Union soldiers worked together to escape by digging tunnels. After many failed attempts, they finally built a successful tunnel to get them out.
10.
John Dillinger. John Dillinger created plenty of trouble during Depression-era America, robbing 24 banks and breaking out of prison twice. While in prison the first time, he became an even better criminal, learning new techniques from inmates. When he got out on parole, he started robbing banks again, but was eventually caught. His first prison escape happened when his gang impersonated police officers. When guards didn't believe them, his gang shot the guards and released Dillinger. After robbing more banks, Dillinger was thrown back in prison, this time at Crown Point, Indiana. To escape, he fashioned a wood gun and threatened the guards with it. It actually worked. He got out again. Dillinger eventually died during an FBI raid.
9.
Billy Hayes. Billy Hayes became a legend who wrote a famous book that turned into a famous movie, but in order to do that, he had to go through a whole lot of hell first. Caught drug smuggling in Turkey in 1970, his prison sentence wasn't easy. He got life in a Turkish prison. The conditions were so awful, it practically drove him insane. Over the years, he was moved from prison to prison, and his sentence was reduced from life to 30 years, until he decided to escape in 1975. Afterward, he wrote the book Midnight Express.
8,
Alfie Hinds. Known as Houdini Hinds, Alfie Hinds was an escape artist, breaking out of 3 high-security prisons. Hinds used his high intelligence, extensive knowledge of the English legal system, as well as prison security weaknesses to his advantage to continue breaking out. He was also successful in evading capture for long periods of time. Eventually, he figured out how to obtain a pardon using loopholes in the legal system.
7,
2015 Clinton Correctional Facility escape. Richard Matt and David Sweat were 2 inmates at the Clinton Correctional Facility, serving life in prison. Getting tools they used in the metal shop and seducing a prison employee to help them, they cut their way out of the prison. An extensive manhunt went underway afterward, resulting in Matt's death and Sweat's capture.
6,
Sarah Jo Pender. In 2008, America's Most Wanted ran a feature on Sarah Jo Pender, the only woman fugitive on their list at the time. She had been convicted of murder and escaped from Rockville Correctional Center using a prison guard as an accomplice. Being smuggled out of the prison, she fled to Northside Chicago and went under a different name. A rerun of America's Most Wanted led to her demise as a neighbor watched the episode and immediately called the police.
5,
Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was one of America's most disturbing serial killers, but what some didn't know is he was also really good at escaping prison. During a preliminary hearing, he requested to represent himself. By doing that, he was allowed to not have shackles or handcuffs. Then, during a recess, he was granted access to the library to research a case, but instead he opened a window and jumped out. He was a fugitive for 6 days before getting caught. His second escape was much more methodical, involving a hacksaw, losing 35 pounds, and cutting a hole in his cell. While guards were celebrating Christmas, Bundy took the opportunity to break out. 17 hours later, prison guards realized Bundy had fled.
4,
Pascal Payet. A convicted killer serving 30 years, Pascal Payet has broken out of prison twice using not a hacksaw or fake IDs, but helicopters. The second time, he broke out in under 5 minutes with no violence. His breakout attempts have become the subject of the White Rabbit Project on Netflix.
3,
Colditz Escape. During World War II, Colditz Castle was used as a military prison by the Nazis. Prisoners used every trick in the book to escape, including tunnels, bed sheets as ropes, and smuggling out through trucks. But the most ingenious escape plan was the glider British soldiers built. Using materials around the prison, they constructed it to hold at least 2 men. All their hard work was wasted though. It was never used as the war came to an end and they were freed. But some speculate it was functioning and could have worked.
2,
Richard Lee McNair. Richard Lee McNair had no intention of staying behind bars and came up with tons of ways to break out, including a time where he used lip balm to squeeze out of handcuffs, or the other time he crawled through an air vent. His most audacious attempt was wrapping up his body as a package and mailing himself out of prison. He's now in one of the toughest maximum security prisons in America.
1,
Brian Bo Larsen. Brian Bo Larsen of Denmark escaped from prison an astounding 22 times. His methods are wide-ranging, including sawing the bars off of windows or hiding out in trash cans. Sometimes it would take him only a day to escape, and other times an entire month, but he'd always escape, and of course, always be caught. Brian Bo Larsen is either the king of prison breaks, or Denmark is just really bad at keeping him behind bars. Probably both. Enjoying our lists? Be sure to click that subscribe button in the bottom right so you don't miss out on new ones every Monday through Friday. Share them with your friends and help us consistently conciliate curiosity. And if you want even more lists, check out these 3 videos here or just head to our website at list25.com.